is very exciting. All right, Jim gave me his readers. We are, so welcome everybody. This is the January 25th meeting of the Stow Selectboard. We have everybody here in the room tonight, and we will start with public input. If you could raise your hand and then identify yourself. Mark.
Mark Forbes, 9 White Pond Road and 39 Adams Drive. Just got one quick question. Is that I noticed there's no correspondence in the meeting packet today. I know there was some kind of a problem that the town administrator was having with somebody who she decided not to do any more correspondence. I just wonder if that's a permanent move on the part of the town administrator and the board, or if that's something that's going to be revisited later on.
I'll just say we're still getting the select board gets all the correspondence. So
No, I understand that, but it was put on the meeting packet before for the public to see, and now it's no longer there for them to see. I'd have to actually request for it to see what's in the packet now, and it was much easier when it was online. I was just curious if this was something that was a temporary decision on your part and her part to do this, or is this going to be revisited later on and say, okay, well, all right, well, maybe this pain in the butt who is a problem has gone away, and we'll stop putting the correspondence back on. I'm just curious.
For now, it's our policy for now. That's
okay.
All I can say.
All right, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Mark. Abby.
Hi, I have a statement I'd like to read, if I may. Thank you for taking my comment. First, I want to thank you, the select board, for discussing the correspondence from several NASJA members during your last meeting. As NASJA president, I'd like to reiterate some of the points that were brought up that maybe had been a little overlooked during the discussion. The first item I'd like to clarify is that the only email that was representing NASJA as a group was mine. The other emails you received were from residents of Stow who are members of NASJA, yes, but they wrote as they felt right as individuals. Ultimately, all of us who wrote specifically to you, the select board, asking to proclaim February as Black History Month because you are the top governing body of the town and as such hold the most power. In order to combat racism, it is crucial, especially as an all-white presenting board, that people in positions of power use their power to acknowledge the hold that racism has had on our country and culture. While proclamations are far from the only thing politicians can do, on this we definitely agree, proclamations hold weight when coming from a position of power. Dismissing proclamations as meaningless or a gimmick is a privilege. For a person from a historically disenfranchised group, proclamations are very meaningful, and some of our members have mentioned this to us specifically. It is a recognition of their existence. Again, this is why we specifically asked the board to make a statement. Your words in the positions you hold have the power for residents to feel seen and that they're welcome here. Secondly, in your meeting, you discussed, or in your last meeting, you discussed how every month of the year has a different awareness or association tied to it, or in your words, flavor of the month. Yes, each month honors many things, and we feel it is important to celebrate the stories and acknowledge the existence of historically marginalized people in our town. Stow has Black residents. Black families and communities have been marginalized since the beginning of this country. As you pointed out, we have history right here in our town that's relevant to the Black experience. And while building safety is important, buildings are not and should not be considered as equally important as acknowledging the history of an entire race and culture of people. Which brings me to my last point. NASJA exists because ordinary residents wanted to make change to make our community more welcoming to all people. We want to encourage people in power, such as yourselves, to keep racism and social justice in the front of your minds and on the agenda in order to make policy that helps all people feel welcome here. NASJA is all volunteer, and while we're happy to continue working with the police department, the public library, the school district, with you, and all the other things that we do as civilians, ultimately, what we really want is for our elected officials and town employees to do it instead. We're thrilled the town administrator has created a DEI group of town employees, and we really look forward to seeing what else they do and we are happy to help support any effort to continue this work. We recognize the board has a huge amount of responsibility and hardly enough time to address everything. We truly do know this. We understand that discussing racism can be off-putting and uncomfortable, and yet we encourage you to think about the decisions you make with a social justice lens. Proclamations should be paired with education. Monthly celebrations should be paired with legislative changes. On this, we completely agree. But if proclamations are not said and monthly celebrations are not honored because we don't have the education or the legislation to pair with it, then nothing changes. Unfortunately, you will never get 100% of people on your side when making change. It just won't happen. But we elected you to be our leaders, so please lead us in the right direction. Lead us toward a more equitable, anti-racist, and welcoming Stow. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby. Seeing no one else, we will move to board comments. Just wanted to, I was gonna include the regional agreement draft in the packet this week, but we learned that due to DESI constraints, the presentation of the revised document won't be going to this annual town meeting. It'll be next year. So we have one more meeting and then I'll distribute the draft so people can see where it's at. There's nothing radically different at this point. So that was the only thing I had. Anybody else have any comments? And then Jim, you wanted to read a draft statement?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So at the last meeting, at the very end of the last meeting, I said that I would draft something for Black History Month for the board to consider. And I was going to share it with the chair and the town administrator, mainly because of open meeting concerns. So I did that, and they made some comments, which I appreciate. So for the board's consideration, you all have a copy of it, so I'll read it out loud. In recognition of Black History Month and prompted by the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others, it is important that the Stow Selectboard make clear that it recognizes that racism continues to exist in the United States and even in our town, that racism can manifest in many ways, from shocking overt expression to more subtle and insidious implicit biases. Many, if not most of us, retain racist attitudes, behaviors, or expressions of which we are often unaware. That Black Americans suffer discrimination and experience historical disadvantages compared to white Americans, the effects of which continue to today. Quite simply, it is a mistake to think that discrimination and racial disadvantage are things of the past. Black History Month is an opportunity to recognize the unique experience and contributions of Black Americans. It is also an opportunity for those of us who are not Black to attempt to appreciate the burdens of their journey through history. To that end, to celebrate Black History Month, the town of Stow will recognize and share stories of perseverance, inspiration, and leadership of Black Americans through weekly social media posts, reading selections from the Randall Library, as well as stories in the monthly newsletter for the Council on Aging and Recreation. To support and honor those who have left a lasting impact on combating racism and discrimination.
So since we didn't get it in the packet, I'm gonna post it next. We'll include it in the packet next time for a vote and to make any changes or suggestions people have to it. So, but thank you, Jim, for drafting it.
Sure.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
I would like to make a motion that we place the approval of this letter into the discussion and possible vote section of the next agenda, to ensure that it is on there and that residents know that it will be on the next agenda for us to approve.
I'll second that. Any discussion? No. All in favor? Aye. All right. Any other recognitions? News? Denise, town administrator's report.
Yes. Okay. First, I would like to thank those employees who worked with me on Saturday morning at the COVID at home test kit distribution. It was extremely cold. We started out at 5-degree temperatures. We kicked off the distribution before 9 a.m. We were holding at 9 to 11. We had folks starting to show up about 7:45. I wanted to thank Bose for allowing us to use their parking lot. It really was perfect for the scenario that we had. Thank you to Chief Soliciting and Lieutenant Thrain from the Police Department, Chief Benoit, Ryan Boyd, Brian Kiley, and Tim Landry from the Fire Department. And a special thank you to our Library Director, Tina McAndrew, who, as soon as she saw the notice for the event, reached out to me and asked how she could help, what she could do. And she was right there with us, freezing for 2.5 hours. We gave out about 400 kits. Then we delivered some to 2 of the congregate housing settings in town. Gave some to the Council on Aging to distribute to their 85-year-old and older seniors, and still have about 400 that we will distribute, likely in another distribution drive-through, only when it's warmer out. I also want to give a very heartfelt thank you. I believe it was the Ruderman family who brought us coffee and snacks, and really it really brightened our morning, and really it was very much appreciated by all of us that they thought of us out there. And I will say, of the, we probably had about 350 cars, some folks carpooled. Every single person that came through thanked us and, mentioned how we were standing out in the cold. So it was very much appreciated. And I just appreciate everyone coming out that morning. So that was huge. So we will be doing something again in the near future. That being said, our current COVID rates are up to 216. We are at a 20.5% positivity rating as of this morning. We do feel, based on the projections of the state, that this is likely to be the peak and we will slowly come back down from this. But we are at 20.5%. The municipal buildings have reopened. We reopened yesterday. You wouldn't know that because no one's coming in, but we did reopen. All visitors to the building are still required to wear a mask, and we ask that people do not linger, please. Employees are very uncomfortable, so we ask you to do your business, pay your bills, ask your questions, and then be on your way. If there are things that can still be done virtually, we ask that you try and continue to do that as much as possible, just until we're really through this and it's warmer and we can open windows and people feel a little bit better. The Community Preservation Committee has met. Last night they met with the Town Hall project folks, and their prior meeting was with the library project and the SMAHT Red Acre project. They plan to discuss the 3 projects at their next meeting on February 7th. They have made no decisions. They still have gone back and forth on the possibility of bonding. They have not made any decisions on that. Hopefully the 17th, if not, they have a meeting scheduled on the 14th as well. So we'll see how that goes. Yesterday, I had a meeting with Superintendent Bequillian from Minuteman High School regarding their budget. And it's not good news. Given our 4-year rolling average of students, ours is the highest percentage increase across the board for all of the communities. It is a 36% increase, which is better than the number they originally gave me, which was 45%. So it is a huge hit. One of the problems and it's a good problem to have if you're the school, but because it's the new facility, because it's a beautiful school, the member community enrollment has skyrocketed, which has left no room for out-of-district students. And the out-of-district students were paying much higher tuition than the in-district. So there is very little supplemental money coming in from out-of-district communities. So we are now covering a larger share because it's all in-district students. Next year, we will be in a similar scenario because right now we were like 19 students, then we jumped up to 36. That will continue for another year, and then hopefully that will roll off and we'll start to see some improvements. I've not seen anything from Neshoba yet. I have a meeting with the superintendent next Monday. I do believe they are scheduled to discuss their budget. I think it's either tonight or tomorrow night. But I couldn't even tell you, we've got nothing preliminarily. We've seen nothing from them thus far. So hopefully we'll have some beginning numbers for that. And then just lastly, just to let the board know, I will be going on vacation starting Friday, February 25th And then I will return to the office on Monday, March 7th. So it's a week and a day. Dolores will be here. Joyce and Phoebe will be here. We don't have a meeting that night. So I think that's it. I've been in budget meetings all day. We've been starting to meet with departments. I had a conversation with Steve Jelinek last night about capital. That was another one where if you include the library, it's about $14 million worth of requests for this year. If you take out the library, the next big chunk is the dam, and what to do with the dam at just under $5 million. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of funding requirements coming up. We'll talk about ARPA a little bit later, but it's been very busy. So I think those are all of the items I wanted to touch on tonight.
Just thank you and everybody, all the staff that you mentioned for doing that. It really is a great service that you made happen because you jumped on the opportunity. So thank you for doing that. And I'm sorry it was so cold.
It was so cold.
Yeah, that just doesn't sound like fun.
I mean, it's funny. At one point, Tina said, it's cold when our police lieutenant had ice on his mustache. So when you look over and see Darren with ice, you couldn't even take off your gloves because your hands would just freeze. It was just so cold. But it was great. It really was great. Like I said, everyone was so appreciative. And it really felt good to be able to give folks these, I know you can buy them many places now, but it's expensive, right? And we have the ability to do that, and we wanted to just get them into folks' hands. So as soon as we could, we were able to pull it off. So that's great.
Any questions for Town Administrator?
No, just thank you and to everyone you mentioned for doing that. I like how a lot of people who didn't need to show up showed up. We're not lacking for hands. It's great.
So next on our agenda, we have the planning board with us. And I can't see everybody, so I don't know if everybody's here, but a good number of you. So we asked them to join us tonight to just sort of have a conversation about what's on their work plan for this year and how we can work together on some of the things that I think overlap. So I know we got a handout from Jesse, I guess, or Jesse and Lori. And Lori, do you want to kick anything off?
Sure, I can kick it off. Hello, everyone. I did work with Jesse and Malcolm to put the summary together. We thought, since this was our first meeting, it would be good just to give you visibility of just the total work plan of things on our plate right now. The intent is not to go through every single one today. I think it's more just so you have visibility and you can tell us the items that you are of most interest to you and that you want to discuss. I know, I think town meeting planning and Lower Village were on your minds. But again, this worksheet pretty much gives you a sense of all the things going on. Some of them are proactive on our part, and some of them clearly are reactive in terms of the applications coming to us as well. And then at the bottom, there are just a couple of other topics that are on our minds that come up as we go through some of these other things. So I guess I'll just lay that out there and see if there are any questions.
Well, I guess, one of the things that's come up, especially because of ARPA money, is the Lower Village. So I'd love to hear more what you guys have been talking about on that score. I know it shows up in a couple of things here.
Sure. I mean, I know, the water thing has been discussed on the planning board, it seems like, for more than 10 years, I would say. And so I know the fact that there's an opportunity there to do the water study is something that has been on our minds. And so that's the water is sort of out there because, we're looking to shape development and influence development to what some of the other work we've done in terms of the visual preference studies and a lot of the work that's gone into, we've been working with a third party on zoning bylaws that can influence future development and how that looks and feels and creating more of a village down there. And so besides the water feasibility, we really are focused on zoning changes that would influence future development to the preferences that we've been discussing for honestly years. And so, there's a big piece of that of anything from setbacks, lot adjournment, trying to encourage whether it's parking on the side or the back versus looking at a full parking lot, things of that nature. And then, of course, we also know that signs are a big topic on everybody's mind, honestly, regardless of what side you're on or what your preferences are. There's a lot of discussion of what we should be doing with the sign bylaw. So that is considered part of a big focus for the lower village as well. Were there other things on the select board's mind when it comes to the lower village?
Anybody want to jump in? I won't be dealing with it. I mean, my only question on those was, I know a couple of them, in terms of the next steps, you anticipate things for this town meeting for the zoning and the bylaw? The sign
We
bylaw?
do, and Jesse, you keep me honest if you think I'm overpromising, but I do think we at least feel that the starting point of some zoning changes need to be put forth this spring. And hopefully, like I said, the third party that we had worked with, they come back with some recommendations that we now need to digest and figure out exactly what that looks like. And clearly, based on the fall meeting, we also said that we'd be looking at the sign bylaw.
I was just curious, because I haven't been attending planning board meetings, where you guys are at with Athens Lane right now.
I'm sorry, with what?
With Athens Lane?
Oh, Athens Lane. I guess, we don't have an application, but Jesse, can you talk to the preliminary discussions thus far?
Sure. So Athens Lane is the site where there's a developer who owns approximately 100 acres down there and is interested in doing an active adult neighborhood. So they're very much still in the planning phase. They've got some concept plans together, for just kind of what we were expecting when we passed the bylaw back at the last town meeting for that district. I think it was 132 to 140 units of mixed income and age targeted housing. So they're absolutely still moving forward. There was just a site visit, I believe it was last week, the week before. And we have another site visit scheduled, basically to go through the process of outlining where the required 50% open space would be best situated on the property. So the bylaw requires that you have these kinds of discussions at the beginning of the process rather than halfway through to try to influence site planning at an earlier stage, which was something the board had learned from other projects. So that's where we are. They're currently doing wetland delineations. I know that they'll be in front of the Conservation Commission before they come to the planning board formally. That's at least what it's looking like right now. So no application yet, but they are definitely, all the gears are turning. We do have the last thing I'll say is we do have a traffic study that they've submitted as well that we've been going over and trying to make sense of.
And so just to add a little context, I mean, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with past discussions with the owners of the property, but they pretty much came to us and we looked at what they could do by right. And they look for our input of how we might want to shape it. And that thought process, going through that thought process really helped us shape the bylaw changes that came forward and got approved. And so, some of the things we were going for really came through in those bylaws. And now we can kind of see in some of the preliminary concepts they've shared with us how those would come to be. So, we don't have to discuss those in detail, but if anybody's interested, certainly happy to spend some time with you offline, just explaining what we were going after with those bylaw changes that were approved.
Great, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I can add to that, that the planning board as well as the Green Advisory Committee have been also having discussions with the developer to encourage them to go greener, whether to offer a more high efficiency units or even to go all electric on units.
And that's a good point, John, because one of the things that we did update our subdivision rules and regs is really to also make sure developers know that we want to push the envelope in terms of green development. So that's, as you can see on the other topics, but it's certainly one of the things that's on our minds as we move forward with anything.
Excellent. Mr. Selby?
Hi, Lori, how are you?
Hi.
Thanks very much for getting everybody together and giving us these materials. I just wanted to ask, it would be greatly appreciated by us if you're bringing major bylaw changes to town meeting, give us as early a heads up about those as you can, even if we don't have a formal role, and I don't think we do. We always get questions from residents in the weeks leading up to town meeting, and it's helpful if we have the bylaw and maybe even an English explanation of what it's doing sometime ahead of time.
And I think based on that request, I would say maybe we should figure out how to have a follow-up joint meeting. And we don't necessarily, and I would say, let's not wait till the language of the bylaw is sort of completely drafted. We can pretty much come forward with, either loose language or at least the concepts of the direction of the different bylaws we'll be going for. So that would be, I guess, my suggestion based on that request. I don't know how the rest of the planning board feels. If you agree, that would be helpful.
I think that would be greatly appreciated on this end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And speaking of that, since you did bring that up, I do want to, and I know I put it on the bottom of the list here under other topics, but I do want to, it's something that I think we both are connected to, which is enforcement. I would say a lot of our discussions and feedback from the public is a lot of input of enforcement or lack of enforcement. And so it comes up, and I'll just give you, the Stow House of Pizza is a good example of, we had a cease and desist. We did a decision. They haven't followed through in that decision. We are now waiting for a modification, but it's very difficult when people just blatantly aren't following through. And we don't have a lot of options to us. And it's disheartening that's just one example. Please don't take that as the specific topic I'm talking about. I just want you to know that residents get very disheartened when we can't even make do with the conditions in the decision that we issue. But yet we come forward sometimes with zoning changes proposed that potentially would give more flexibility. And I can tell you that residents are not open to flexibility when we can't even count on the follow through of special permit conditions, never mind just, general compliance. So it's a topic that is on our minds when we talk about bylaw changes because of that. And I think it's important for you all to know that as well.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a topic we could have a whole separate topic.
Well, could I mean, I think it's been a perennial issue for
Yeah.
the longest time. I would suggest, and I'm glad that Lori brought it up, I was just, any conversations along those lines, especially about specific places, should begin with either the building inspector or the town administrator. And clearly, if we're talking about specific places, it's not a policy thing.
Right.
But the only other thing I wanted to mention, I don't have a crystal ball or anything like that, but I have a feeling that due to some personnel changes, you're probably going to see a different philosophy going forward. But those conversations, which are very worth having, should probably start with the building inspector or the town administrator.
And certainly in the example I gave, we have reached out and we'll be working with the building inspector. So it's not, I'm not, I think we all understand that the specifics start there. But it's more just a general topic for you to be aware of.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know if there's other interest in specific line items.
Zach has a question for you.
I have one. Hi, Lori. Thank you for talking about the enforcement side of things. I think we see hot spots on both of our boards that are, quite similar. And I think, us working together to try to resolve those and trying to do the best we can do from our policy side and your zoning side could really be helpful in sort of lowering the temperature that we see in certain issues. And I think that would only benefit the town. But I wanted to ask you a question on sort of a completely other side of things, which is about the master plan initiation. I personally, in reading this sort of living plan and thinking about how, we're trying to respond very quickly to a lot of requests, for example, the new school that's coming in, and how we're sort of trying to handle these things quickly. I actually really liked this sort of proposal, and I would love to see and to hear from you all of what your, if you could expand upon this living plan and how we could, really work together on what that looks like, so we can be providing more feedback between the boards if we're going to pursue this, more living plan style.
I mean, I'll give my own perspective, and I certainly welcome other planning board members to give their perspectives as well. I think for some of us who, witnessed the last update to the master plan and what a big endeavor it was, I think, I know for my own personal side, I kind of take a step back and say, well, there's got to be a better way that we kind of put out a plan and then wait years and years and years go by. And then now we have to think about doing it all over again. And I certainly draw upon my work experience in that there's been a very big shift in the workplace of continuous improvement and allowing things to evolve versus a complete overhaul. That's definitely a trend in the software industry. And so for me, I think that, taking out bite-sized chunks, and we can section it off and however people have interest in, but I think if we go after bite-sized chunks and then it's a continuous update on an annual basis, we can agree, okay, this year, these are the highest priorities. Let's focus on these sections or these specific topics. And then, the committee that comes together can work through a proposed recommended update that can be accepted. And to me, that should then be an ongoing process where it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And frankly, then the plan is always as up to date as it can be, because we're updating various the highest priority topics or sections for the town. And so that's sort of my thought process behind it. I don't know if anybody else on the planning board has additional thoughts. Oh, Karen, you're on mute.
I agree entirely with what you said. My pet peeve with any master plan that we've done, this town and many towns have done over the years, you spend lots of time, lots of money in preparing a really nice wrapped up plan, and it sits on a shelf. So the priority should be working towards implementation of the plan.
Yeah, it just seems that totally makes sense on so many levels to do it. And, maybe that's what, yet another conversation, but to sort of figure out where we want to start in that sort of, biting off, what's next, and you guys probably have a good perspective on what's missing right now or what needs to be updated first.
And maybe, the first step is really just taking an inventory of the different either sections or topics that we can then jointly look to prioritize. That way we can then say, okay, well, we know, we can focus, and people don't feel so overwhelmed when they're signing up for the committee, frankly, that they know that they're going to be working on, the top 2 priorities. And then frankly, the committee can come together for people who have either special expertise or interest in that area as well.
That's a really good point, because it is one of those jobs that who wants to do it, because you'll be doing it for the next 2 years or whatever. Yeah. Great. Other thoughts for either the planning board or planning board members? Anything else you guys, we can unmute you. I do want to actually, since people are watching, we should introduce the members of the planning board for people who don't know you. Karen Kelleher, she's there. She's our former town planner. Meg Costello is on there. Meg, wave. There we go. Nancy Arsenal. You met Lori already, and John. Am I missing? Who did I miss? Did I miss anything? No, that's everybody, right? The 5.
Oh, and we do have Mark Jones, our voting associate member.
Forget you're an associate. Mark's everywhere.
And then, of course, I don't know if everybody knows Malcolm and Jesse.
I was going to say Malcolm Reagan, our assistant planner, and Jesse Stedman, our planner. So thank you, guys. This was a great start. I think we, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just think either Laurie or Jesse, can you just touch upon with the board what they are expecting with the Stow Acres application and the LIP process, please?
Oh, good idea.
Sure.
I guess, Jesse, do you want to try to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So the expectation right now is just to give you a sense of where we are. We received draft local initiative program applications, which is basically just the application that the prospective developer will provide the town to put out the housing plan for development. That goes to DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and they make sure that all of those affordable units will count towards the town's subsidized housing inventory. So it's also, this LIP application is also a chance to really see the development kind of in whole, the entire concept of what is being proposed. So as we've done in past projects, our office and our consultant with Metro West's Collaborative Development, housing consultant, reviewed that LIP application. We gave the developer some comments back. They're planning on getting those to us by the end of the week. And what we plan to do is to provide the select board with a letter of recommendation based on the changes that were made and what we see in that LIP application for, I believe, February 8th is what we're aiming for, if that agenda space holds. And so what you'll have is a formal recommendation from the project team and from some of the boards. I know the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board and others have been in this process. And so that you can at least know when you get that material, stuff that you don't necessarily see every day, that it's been vetted in a process that we have undertaken for the last couple months.
And just to be, so is it for the entire project, or is this specifically on the sort of housing portion?
Yeah, so this is the LIP application is specifically for the housing development side of the project. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do have that on the agenda. We have that placeholder for next meeting.
Great, yeah. So as far as I know, that everything should still be ready for that time.
All right. So if there's no other questions.
Can I ask a question?
The board.
All right. I certainly, you don't have to answer tonight, but I do think the planning board is likely also interested in, some of the hot topics or high priorities for the select board, especially since I know you've been having discussions around that as well. So at some point, if you can share that with us, and then I didn't know if any other the planning board members had specific questions for the select board. All right. I guess that's it for. Oh.
Okay. All right, so we'll, I mean, I don't know that I have anything else to say on our work plan, except for our work plan is Denise's work plan. So, I mean, some of the things we talked about in terms of Lower Village has been on the ongoing list. Right now, I think ARPA money is a high priority on our list to figure out how to do that, which we'll be talking about more. But so we'll be in touch on that one, and also we'll. I mean, I think moving on the master plan piece is something we could actually start making some progress on. So we'll be in touch about that.
Okay.
Great. Thank you all. Really appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay. Tina's, I'm sure Tina's there somewhere. Yes, she is. There's a lot of people. So yeah, we're going to get to hear an update from our library director on the building project, the library building project.
In the library.
In the library in general, which opened yesterday. Saw people parked out front today. It was very exciting. So
I made a little bit of a presentation. If I could share my screen, is that good? Okay. Get the view here. All right. Well, full house tonight, but I wanted to thank the select board members for having me and giving me some time tonight. I'll run through this hopefully fairly quickly. I wanted to start a little bit with just what's been going on at the library the past year. As you all know, town buildings were closed. So we were closed for quite a while, providing people materials in paper bags outside until we were able to reopen in July. Despite that, we were able to keep up our statistics fairly well. We still had 16,000 patrons visit the past 6 months, and we continuously added to our collection. We have some notable program updates. We started a partnership with Sustainable Stow for monthly programs on climate change, and we host monthly trivia programs. We did get a grant to do a One Book, One Stow program, which was, we invited writer Debbie Irving, who wrote the book Waking Up White, which talked about her being raised in Massachusetts with white privilege, and it was a great program. And soon we'll be starting what we're calling a doorstep delivery program to deliver library materials to those that are homebound for whatever reason, whether it's sickness or their inability to get to the library. So we're hoping to roll that out sometime in the near future. But I will get to the nitty-gritty about the library renovation. So just quick, and I won't read the slides, but the building committee's been working on this for a solid year and a half. We sent out a request for proposals. We had 12 firms walk through the library, 8 of which sent in proposals. The building committee interviewed 5 firms and unanimously agreed upon Design Lab, which is out of Boston. And they worked feverishly from June and July to November, putting together some renditions of a possible renovation that I'll be sharing with you in a little bit. There were several guiding principles here. Again, as with every town building, we wanted accessible for all. The struggle with Randall that's specific to the library is the fact that the 1800s edition or library and the 1970s edition really don't mesh. They feel like you're walking into 2 different buildings. And aside of that, structurally, where the 2 buildings meet has been plagued with problems for many decades. And I will be showing some of those later. We're also looking to reinstate the original entrance on Library Hill with landscaping architecture that would allow for open space and meeting areas.
Tina, just quick, Are you trying to show us slides?
Am I not?
We don't see, we're seeing you.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Well, no, you're lovely, actually.
No, that's not lovely.
I realized when you said you weren't gonna read the slides and then,
After all of that, my goodness.
Sure.
It all made sense, so.
but it all made sense. You're
You're
totally
fine,
clear, so.
But
How's this now? Let's start again. No, I'm not going to start again.
Oh,
But I will show you what I was talking about. So let me go from here. These were our statistics, which I kind of read about in the building committee. My apologies. So I was here, which we did some feedback boards, which was one of the ways we got community communication, and people were allowed to put little dots on a board about where they wanted to see the library expand space. So whether that was quiet space or a children's room. And then on the right-hand side, you see the board where people could take a sticky note and be more specific about what they desired out of their community library. And through this, Design Lab was able to really put together extensive diagrams of what our community wants from our new library. And as you can see, it's really getting it up to date, modern technology, meeting space, outside meeting space, quiet areas. And we really want to make it a building that isn't just for now, but will be for future generations. You know, we're looking into the future and not just trying to figure out what we need for the next 5 or 10 years, but going forward. I wanted to just share that if I'm sure some of you or all of you remember that the CPC did fund a renovation of the historic building in 2017 and 2018. And as you can see here, there were many things done, new doors, new staircase to the attic. And our intention is to preserve this as much as possible. We will have to get to the innards of the library with the electrical and the heat and all of the mechanics, but it is our intention to preserve this as it has been renovated in the past. So ultimately, and I'll be showing a slide in a few minutes when it comes to the cost, which everyone's interested in. It's going to take half of the cost of a new library just to get the building systems up to code. So our fire protection system is out of date. As many of you know, our HVAC continually fails and we don't have heat on the second floor. So there's a lot of older equipment and that just needs to be updated, even if we don't do all of the space changes and the renovation of or the addition of a newer building. So I just wanted to share that. And I saw this photo, which I thought was great. I don't know when it was from, but you can see Common Road looks like a path. And this really shows the beauty of the library in its heyday. The slope down toward Common Road is slight. There's stairs, there's the great entrance. And I was lucky enough to visit the West Somerville Library branch, which is what Design Lab recently finished. And what this picture doesn't show is that people are sitting out there, they're enjoying the outdoor space. And if you can see in the picture, those windows and doors are multi-purpose. So you can actually have them open to the fresh air or closed to use as a community room or however you want it. The elevator's located in there. There's projection and screen. So it's really a multi-purpose flexible space, which I thought was amazing. This is what the upstairs, the second floor would look like. To the left of the horizontal line is the 1800s library. The purple dotted line is the where the original entrance would be reinstated. To the right of the vertical line is where the 1970s edition exists. And this diagram shows a newer version that would be built with an elevator instead of the lift and relocation of space, stairs and everything. So one of our biggest challenges right now, aside of the heat, is the fact that we have a permanent tarp on the inside of the children's room where the slanting windows are on Crescent Street. It's been leaking for decades, but not as significantly as it is now. So the building department fortunately came and they've put up a tarp that funnels the water into a bucket when it rains or snows. So that's one of the things that would be taken off with a restoration of that space. And just as I go to the cost real quick, as you can see, there's so many elements of a price estimate. New mechanical system, elevator, utilities, and then on the right are all of those costs we sometimes don't think about. If we move, we have to move out of the library, pay for storage and all of that. So there's quite a lot to do with moving out of the library, which adds to the cost. The top part is something you've seen before, and the bottom is the first floor. So you can see Common Road. There'll be two entrances, one on Common Road, one on Library Hill. There'll be different landscaping, as I mentioned, that will really restore the beauty of the original library, but also be something that people can use and meet outside and sit outside. That's something we've really tried with our limited outdoor space, putting in the picnic tables and the chairs that were donated. But this would really help us to give patrons a better experience. And a quick picture that Design Lab did for us is what it would look like with the original entrance on Library Hill to the right, and looking into what would be the new addition, which is where the 1970s edition is right now. And this is a very preliminary drawing of what the outside would look like. We realize we've already gotten a lot of feedback about this, concerns about what it will look like and if it'll blend with the older building. So I just want to say again that this isn't exactly what it'll look like, but we wanted to have something that would kind of encompass what we hope the modernization of the new part of the library would look like. But as you can see, there's a lot of space that could be used with this rendition. And so now the cost that everybody's looking for. So just to get the building up to code, which I mentioned earlier, is $4.1 million. So that's just if we go in there and fix everything that's wrong with the mechanics of the building. And then we added in the other parts that I showed you on the other diagram, the site work and architecture and the soft costs. And so we're looking at a project that's over $8 million. That being said, we do have financial commitments already from the Board of Trustees at $500,000 and the Hale High School Fund at $400,000. There is a third fund that supports the library called the Second Century Fund. We're still awaiting what they are willing to give us financially. And as mentioned in the meeting earlier, I did request $1 million from the CPC over the course of 3 years to support historic and open space. Like I said, it's been quite a year and a half, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. If you think of anything later, these are the building committee members. If you'd like to reach out to me, that's great. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to anybody else on this list, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions you have. So with that I missed the first few slides. If anyone wants to see anything, let me know.
So Tina, you mentioned, the closing and temporary space or storage. What is the plan? Would the whole library have to close during the construction? I assume so, right? It's pretty all encompassing. Do you have a
yeah,
thought?
that's right. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to stay there as much as we kind of contemplated that, but it just wouldn't be safe for anybody. So no, we don't have a plan yet. We haven't gotten that far, no.
We've talked about some options, but until we really figure out what's needed to sustain that time, is it just the books and storage and staff somewhere? We're still trying to figure out those types of logistics, but we do have a couple of options. We do have space in existing town buildings, and there is the possibility of renting space in town if need be. So we'll talk about that a little more as we get through town meeting and the ballot, because it will still be approximately the first year will be the architectural work. So they would not be breaking ground for a year after that. So we have plenty of time to plan accordingly.
Great. Other questions? comments? Okay, thank you, Tina. It's
Oh, you
very
guys
exciting.
let me off easy. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Appreciate you coming. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, next is a discussion on the old highway building, which I have a picture of. Do people know what the old highway barn is? I mean, most people here do, right? So just for background, so this came up, well, partly it comes up tonight because as SMAHT brought it up actually last summer, all of their projects have a long lead time. And so getting this part of it moving will give it, hopefully they'll be ready to work on it once the Red Acre project is in its next phase. So it comes up back in 2017, the building reuse report said that there was basically no interest in the old highway barn. And it's actually considered close to being condemned. It's not habitable and it's not safe even for storage at this point. It's the previous building director, I think, said it should come down. Mike can give us some more details, but I just, in terms of background, when Pine Point came up, when that property transfer was being discussed, SMAHT talked to town council and they proposed a process which the select board didn't adopt, but they also used it for the Pine Point transfer. So that's what the proposal tonight is, basically to start that process. And at some point the select board can discuss making it a formal policy for future transfers of land. But basically the first step is to call a joint boards meeting, just to confirm if there's still no interest in the old highway barn except for from SMAHT, and then any other concerns that might be raised. So that's sort of what our topic is tonight. I'm gonna stop there and see if Mike, you want to give a little more background on the thoughts for the highway barn?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I did prepare a quick couple of bullet points just for that process, if you'd like me to share that on the screen.
Sure.
Is visible?
Visible.
Great. So, so thank you very much again. So this was when SMAHT had requested control of the Pine Point and Queens Lane properties in 2013. Can't believe it was February 1st, I think, of 2013. So it's been taking a long time. That project's still going on. But anyway, we had proposed this as a process for after speaking with town council. They had suggested that this is the process that needs to happen, and we kind of formalized it into steps. So the first step is for us to send a memo, which we recently have done and you've been in receipt of. The next would be this does say Board of Selectmen, sorry, because it was from 2013. We didn't change that, but distributes the memo to all town boards and solicits feedback. If necessary and discussion needs to occur, then a joint boards meeting is called. And then if the select board finds to declare the parcel surplus, then if the decision goes to proceed, then SMAHT and the select board would draft the town meeting articles to that extent, and that can be those can have constraints on it. For instance, the Pine Point one was that we had to have obtained a building permit within 10 years, or then wouldn't automatically, but then the discussion would occur. We'd revisit it and see whether it needs to go back to the select board or whether it could be extended. If decision, then SMAHT would then do community outreach and education about why this is important or what the process would be. Then at town meeting would decide whether to change the use, and then if so, then SMAHT would proceed with assessing potential for housing. And the reason that this needs to happen is that there are probably, probably $10,000 to $20,000 would need to be invested into the property to determine the suitability for housing, perk tests, all that kind of stuff. How many units could be there? And the idea is to not, and since there are restrictions on the trust funds, is that we could not do that unless it was in our control. And also there's certain things that we would need to do that are easier to do once control is within the trust, as opposed to doing it while the select board still has control. So that's it.
Okay. So tonight we are discussing whether, see if the board is willing to basically do this, the first step, which to distribute a memo of intent to the boards to see if there's interest in it. And I don't know if it requires a vote or not, but it seemed like, since it's been a while since we used this process, I want to make sure people are clear on what the process is. I mean, I think the reason it's coming up now is that ideally SMAHT would like to have this on town meeting. If it moves to that point, it would be timely to get it on the warrant this spring.
And I'd only add that we were going to do this last year, but there was so much else going on that we decided to hold off. And then, well, there was a possibility of it on the last fall town meeting, but that was we couldn't turn this process around fast enough to get on the town meeting in the fall. So that's why we've put this off to now.
Jim, did you have something?
Well, I can't think of a better use than affordable housing at this point, but can we start by soliciting feedback from the town administrator? Have you even had a chance to focus on this building, and does this fit into whatever plan you or the facilities department may have?
I have not spent time on this building.
No, it's been since 2017, basically nobody, the report basically said nobody wants this building. So it's just sitting there, and it's actually a hazard. It was recommended then to take it down.
Yeah.
So
Pretty derelict.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I've never understood why the first step has to be to transfer to SMAHT.
I don't know. I don't know if these steps are required, if this is something that the board put together. I don't know.
no, well, this was recommended by town council. These steps were what John Whitten had suggested. This is how we should go through the process.
Right, but was it a suggestion or is it a requirement? That I don't know. Again, I don't know. I don't know if this is what the right process is, or if something can be done beforehand. I don't know that.
Well, and I was going to ask, my understanding from the materials is that it's expected the town will obviously demolish the building, and, well, I guess clean it out first and then demolish it. If we're going to do that, shouldn't we keep control of it? Because that's like the first step.
Sure. I would agree. I would agree.
I can't think right now of a better use, but this seems a little, why don't we do the things that were laid out? Well, let me start off on a more positive note. I agree with your overall point that let's get this ball rolling on doing something with this building, most likely affordable housing, because I can't think of anything else.
Mhm.
But is the first step this, or is the first step what the report says, which is SMAHT does the due diligence and the town cleans it out and demolishes it, and I will add the town administrator and facilities department just think about this, because it sounds like they haven't really had a chance to think about this, and make sure there's no reason not to do this. Isn't that, and whatever reasons you've got for why SMAHT can't do the due diligence without having control, that sounds like something to talk to town council about, because I can't imagine why that has to be the case. But I can't imagine there's not a workaround that.
Well, one question would be if SMAHT spends a certain amount of money out of their account to assess the property, and then the select board decides that, or somebody steps forward and says, oh, now that this all now the building's demolished, isn't this lovely? Let's make it a pocket park, and then SMAHT is out there.
I mean, that's fair. It's gotta be sequenced in a way that that doesn't happen. But I agree with the strategic point. Let's get the ball rolling on this. I'm not sure about the tactical points, the logistical points.
I think if I could, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
So there's two things. One is that my only understanding of the part that's absolutely required is the board has to declare it surplus before it can go to town meeting and ask for the care and control to be transferred. So all the rest of this are leading up to that, and then what happens after that. So that's the only part from town council that absolutely has to happen. The board has to say it's surplus, and then it can be transferred. If on this particular, I think on this particular property, it's slightly, I think, Jim, your point is really good. It would not have worked on the other parcels that we'd asked for because of the situation that was. This has been in use, and we know a lot more about these parcels. Those other parcels had been transferred from for tax taking, and there was nothing known. There was really nothing known about those parcels. So the idea was that we didn't want to have to ask twice, and if when we were going to RFP, in order for us to issue an RFP, SMAHT had to be in control of it. In this case, because there's already a building there that's been historically part of the town for many, many years, and we know it, I think that would be a perfectly fine way to go about it, is to do the due diligence first before we go ahead and request transfer.
So, because I think what Courtney was just saying was like, is there a risk of doing it if SMAHT does the due diligence, or are you saying the town does the due diligence?
I mean, it's SMAHT's money or it's town's money. I mean, it's not deep money, but if you want to use SMAHT's, if trust funds, it seems to make sense, as Courtney said, to do that. If you think that it's wiser for the town to do that diligence, where it takes down the building and does, looks whether housing is appropriate before it transfers that, then those would come from town's funds. And I know it seems like, the trust funds are a perfectly good source for that. So I think it's a matter of choice, and maybe as part of the discussion that we begin to have jointly.
Hi, Jim.
I'm sorry to monopolize. So I'm thinking that the appropriate step right now, I kind of agree with starting the surplus process, unless the town administrator tells me some reason not to. It seems like it's a good idea to get that out of the way. But rather than us getting specific about exactly what happens next, why don't we just ask, I'm struck by the town administrator saying that she hasn't even thought about this. So why don't we just ask town administrator and the building department, facilities department, to have some conversations with SMAHT about how to move forward on this, assuming that this is where we want to go. Is that a fair thing to do?
I think that's fine, but I need to understand the timing component, because if the request is that the town is demolishing and removing all that materials, I'm gonna have to plan for that, which means that's right now in the budget process.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is why the first step should be just a discussion, because we can sit here and say this ought to happen and that ought to happen, but unless we're individually ready to write some checks, it's not going to happen. So that seems like really the most we can do tonight. Do you disagree with the idea of getting this, to me, the formality of the surplus?
No, I have no problem with that. But again, if we're trying to wrap this up to get on an article with the deadline of April 1st, that I have concerns with, given everything else that's going on right now. I don't know what else would need to be done that we would have to then come back before this group and vote on that by April 1st.
Well, I'm just going to say.
Well, the building doesn't have to come down. Are you saying because of the budget implications?
Correct. So if I need to include money in my budget, then we have to have much more of this discussion quickly, because I need to find a way to fund that and where those funds are gonna come from.
I mean, can I just say, I don't know why there's the rush.
There is no rush.
Yeah, I think we will do some
Okay.
good yeoman's work tonight if we just get this ball rolling.
Okay,
SMART
yeah, well,
has-
we just want to get the ball rolling. That's, I mean, this came up last summer and then we punted it and then it came up a few months ago and we, no, I really, I owed it to SMART to put this on the agenda because we've been putting it off. So I don't think the building has to come down in the next year. It could be fiscal 24 budget. It's really getting the process going so we know if it's worth, I mean, maybe it's not the right place to put housing. Maybe it's got, their research will say it's too small or it's, you know, I mean, that's also a possibility. And no, it's not a huge lot, so.
I just ask a question about declaring something surplus, just so I understand. If we declare it surplus, does that take it off our plate? Because that's my concern is that we declare something surplus and then it's like, who's gonna take the building down? Because then it doesn't somehow.
No, it's still ours until we get rid of it.
Okay.
It's sort of declaring no use for it.
Okay.
We can't.
I'm thinking of surplus materials.
Well, it's sort of like
It's the
it's
same
that's
thing.
diff-
If you declare it surplus,
Right.
it's still ours until we physically put it in a trash or sell it on an auction.
Okay.
like we
Okay.
do with the highway department.
Okay.
last time.
Right.
But
This
this
just
board
wanted to
has to,
understand.
this
Yep.
board has to take the vote to say,
Yep.
we have no purpose, it has no value
Okay.
for us.
I've always thought of it as a reverse procurement.
Okay,
In order to get rid of something, you have to go through practically the same process.
Right.
got it.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead. No, please. Would an action item for us tonight be to agree in some formal way that we're going to, I mean, I guess Jim suggested that the town administrator and SMART and the building department all speak to each other, so maybe it's too soon to send a memo to the other.
If I were to make a motion, it would be for the town administrator to begin discussions with SMART, along with whatever staff she thought was appropriate, and to begin the surplus property process, if that is appropriate. Well,
No, I did it exactly what I wasn't ready to write things down.
One I would say, we're in discussion phase now, I think, on the motion.
It's
Which is
true.
Totally fine with me. I just wanted to say that I actually really agree with this process because I actually think that the entire surplus process is this board's decision on how we want to do it, which boards we want. Like, we can declare a surplus and say it's going to SMART. Like, I'm not sure why we're being instructed by town council to need to go to every other committee if we choose that SMART is the right committee that's next. So I'm a little confused by this, and I also think I like the surplus thing first. I think SMART needs to do some diligence and figure out if this is even plausible, because before we write and undertake a town meeting articles discussion with the town, I can't imagine us sitting at town meeting saying, we don't know yet if the diligence is going to work. You
Right,
should approve this meeting. You know, that just doesn't, like, that's not going to go well. And I'd rather walk in and say, we've done the diligence, it's ready to go. Here we are, we declared the surplus. Approving this means SMART gets to get started with. You know, to me, it's an easier sell to everybody in the community, so they know we've done our diligence, we've done it correctly. And I like your sort of timeline approach of, I think we can get this ball rolling and get us to surplus without needing to spend any money. And then we start to make sure that we're in the right position. So that way, frankly, I think we put SMART on the best platform we can for any sort of use of this space, following with, the associated costs at that point. But that was sort of my.
So I will say the joint board's history is, I mean, this sort of started with land 60, chapter 61 projects. And so we got into this habit of saying, well, let's not just make any assumption that, SMART gets it or Concom gets it or whoever, that we wanted to make sure that there was discussion so that we had a process. And that's where this came out, was that same idea. So
But
yes, we might have the
that
authority.
report polled the boards 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So 5 years ago, all the boards said, thank you very much, we don't want it. So is that good enough, or do we have to do it again because it's been 5 years?
Right, that's right, yeah.
Well, I mean, I would suggest we do it with everything. So if we're gonna get rid of equipment, we send a memo out to departments. And I would say, so to your point, yes, I mean, things have changed. I don't think there's any board or committee or department that wants the building, or for instance, we're looking at a major library renovation. Maybe they say we need more parking and this makes more sense. The Council on Aging is looking for storage space for their vans. Maybe it makes more sense to retrofit a building that we have. Again, I don't think any of those are possibilities, but we should see if another department has an interest and then really weigh the options of what makes the most sense before we just turn it over.
I actually thought there was a regulatory process where we had to advertise getting rid of any property. Am I wrong about that? Was
No,
that
but
just a statement?
SMAHT falls under our umbrella, so we're not actually getting rid of it.
But then when they sell it, they don't have to do it?
Well, if they
This is
sell
added
it,
to our housing.
if they sell it, then it falls under chapter 30B.
Well, I would assume eventually they would sell it to a developer.
Then that's their process and their public procurement process.
The internal process started sometime before I was on the board, when we got rid of something that somebody wanted, and I don't remember what it was. But ever since then, there has been this very quick.
Right. it's
Yeah.
quick.
I just think it should be under the control of this board to choose what we want to do, mostly because of Ms. Rich's point
Yeah.
about, like, we have a survey in 2017, we have a town administrator who actively understands the needs and easily can reach out, and I just want that to be in our control, so that way we can move at the pace we need to move.
Well, the board did adopt a surplus policy, so you all put a surplus policy in place on how to handle, and it does talk about the $10,000 threshold and over and above, because that, again, it follows 30B, so there are specific things that have to be done anyways.
And I think we should uncover, there was the report somewhere since, or maybe it was either right before this 2017 or maybe afterward, it basically said, you don't even want to store anything in this building because it's coming down. So unfortunately, I mean, it would mean building a new, or maybe parking storage units. Maybe that's where we put the trailers for the library storage. I don't know. But anyway, so, okay, so we do have a motion and a second on the table. Could you restate it, do you think, Jim?
So I think I moved to authorize town administrator to begin conversations with SMAHT, along with whatever staff she thinks is appropriate, to dispose of the Crescent Street, the old Crescent Street Highway Garage / fire station, and to begin, and if appropriate, to begin the surplus property disposal process.
Good, thank you. Ms. Fresh, I already seconded it. Is there any other comments? Mr. Kupczynski, did you have any final questions or comments?
No, just I think I just want to reiterate, there is no rush. There's no, if there's a lot of other things going on, those take precedence. We just want to get the process started again. And if it takes longer, then it doesn't get onto this town meeting warrant, then so be it.
Okay. All right, so I will ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so the next is we got a lovely position to have to accept a donation for animal control. So we need to open a special account for this. $1,000 gift from, Peter. No, I'm blanking on Peter's last name.
Peter Rhoads.
Peter Rhoads, right. Oh, it says right there. So I don't know if we need, is there any other information we need? It's pretty straightforward.
Correct.
So we do need to, it is by statute, we have to accept the gift. So would someone like to make the motion?
Madam Chair, I move to open a donation account for animal control and accept a $1,000 donation from Peter K. Rhoads to be deposited in said account.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rhoads. That's very generous of you. All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Yeah, unanimous. Great. I'm sure the animal control officer will appreciate it. Next, Highway Superintendent has a request for advancing sick time, and I did see, yep, he was on here before. There's a lot of people. Steve is here. I don't know, or Denise, do you want to speak to it?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's just, it's the personnel bylaw requires the request to come from the department head to the select board, but Dolores and I have reviewed. Dolores has spoken at length with Brian Taranto, and we are supportive of the request to advance 30 days sick time in accordance with bylaw Article 11, Section 11. At this time, we're not sure how many of the 30 days would be required. We are hopeful that he will be able to return prior to that, but it would be beneficial to acknowledge and be there for an employee when they need the additional time to address what he's dealing with. So I ask for your support. And that's it.
I guess my only question was, are we concerned about a precedent?
It's in the bylaw. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We still have to, no matter what.
Any department head can still
Can
request an advancement by this board that falls into the personnel bylaw. So I'm not concerned. Really, it is a case by case basis. Brian is a longtime employee. He's a valued employee. And like I said, this is when you want to be able to be there for your employees.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have no concerns at all about this particular case. So.
Yeah, but no, it is allowed under the bylaw.
Any questions or comments?
Yep.
All right, a motion, please.
Madam Chair, per request of the Highway Superintendent, I move to advance 30 days sick leave to the Highway Department employee Brian Taranto in accordance with the town's personnel administration bylaw, Article 11, Section 11, Item F.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. Okay. The switch is to you. ARPA. So last meeting, we approved the forms and sort of the process for people making requests. Got our first request, maybe still only one request so far. You said there might be more as of Friday. And I wasn't sure that we were clear on how we want to start approving these. You know, I can't remember who said it, but someone pointed out, you know, we could nickel and dime ourselves to use up all the money without, you know, thinking about the big picture, bigger projects that might be needed. So I didn't want to jump into starting, you know, I mean, to distributing the first proposal until we sort of were clear, you know, how do we want to address this? I mean, it's tricky because we don't, I mean, the form will tell us, you know, how soon they need the money, how much they need it for, whatever. But it's, you know, you know, we don't have this master list though. I mean, we know some big things we would be interested in, but I think it really is going to be challenging to figure out at what point. We don't want people to be left hanging, but on the other hand, do we wait 6 months and then look at the whole list, or do we say every month we'll look? So I just wanted to open up for some discussion before we start going anywhere else. Yes.
I have a couple of thoughts. One is, it seems certainly that it sounds like getting through budget season would be really important before we funded any requests. And then I think, for me, I would prefer to see a number of requests in context with each other rather than take them individually. I'm separately developing a frame of mind about funding requests in other areas. And, you know, we talked about having planning, you know, about planning different things that the town would like to see, whether it's a master plan and I think kind of seeing things in context makes sense to me, you know, rather than backing up one down possibility.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just a couple things on that. I think one of the things though to keep in mind is, as I mentioned, we have a significant amount of capital projects, and if we would like to pay for some of them through these fundings, now would be the time we have to have those conversations, because there's only so much free cash to go around. The second thing is the two requests that have already come in, the hope would be that they would be acted upon prior to sort of town meeting in July 1st, so they could get the ball rolling on those. So if that is going to be a decision that the board makes, that may impact projects that are coming forward for even the lower village water study. I mean, those are things that people have kind of been waiting to get going as soon as possible. So if there will be sort of a delay, then that may change the kind of requests that come in and how we look at some of those projects and funding those in another fashion.
So the reason I said I thought we should get through the budget season was in order to create the opportunity for you to manage the budget and access the funds before they were granted to somebody else. That was kind of my point, was at least to look at it all in context of what you know, of all of the demands that there are on the budget this year in particular.
Well, and your point about capital projects, I mean, that sort of says, well, we should have a discussion with either with capital planning or with, you know, you bring that list to, and make suggestions with things that you would recommend us using ARPA money versus town money for, or, I mean, I guess it's more a question, I guess, I mean, there's three options: spend ARPA money, spend town money, or not fund it, right? So,
Right. My only concern would be if the board is looking, you know, may want to review the projects but not approve them, then I still need to put everything forward through capital to fund in another mechanism, because if I find them to be priority projects and then I expect that we're going to fund them through ARPA and then you guys say, no, I don't want to.
right.
I can't then go back and cover free cash if we've already allocated that. So I just need some understanding of, you know, timeline process so that I can, we have two so far. I know of a third one coming in, plus the Lower Village water. Those are the ones I know of. I know other people are working on requests, but I just would need to know if I am going to take that into consideration during the budget process. And then there would have to be some approval before I make a final recommendation, because otherwise I need to recommend in a different fashion. So.
So,
No, go ahead.
so it sounds like you're saying there's going to be various rounds of requests, and you're saying the first round has got to be pretty fast, pretty soon.
Well, I don't know that there needs to be rounds. It's, you know, right now it's open until we decide it's closed or we use all the funding. So whether you want to have benchmarks so people know that they have to apply by a certain day. But yes, to me, in order to properly have the conversations with capital, the finance committee, and you all, when it relates to projects, capital, and budgets, I need to know what projects will be up for consideration now, because I'm meeting with all the departments.
So it sounds like you need some sort of deadline that's like February 1 or February 15th at the latest, that says, get your request in or you're not going to be considered during this budget season for ARPA money, or something like that.
Well, not necessarily. Because if it comes in March 1st, we may say it's valid, we're gonna just skip ARPA money. But if it's something that meets the criteria of capital that I feel is a priority, I need to make sure it's included, because if it's not, then we miss that vote.
But the capital thing, that's got to be put together by February 1st, February 15th. And that's got to be the first stuff we consider.
Correct.
I mean, that's because the capital request, we're supposed to be in right by the end of the year, a calendar year.
Yeah, the
So-
capital request is closed, but
So
I
that-
think some folks didn't submit the straight ARPA projects that could potentially, or that meet the criteria for capital as capital, because they weren't expecting to submit it through the budget.
Right.
But it still needs
Gotcha.
to go through the same approval process with
Right.
capital. So, but those are the ones that I would say, I wouldn't fund those through the capital project.
Right.
If you don't support it,
Yeah.
we would just wait and
We're gonna wait.
address it later with ARPA. But the ones that I have a capital request and I have an ARPA request to use those funding instead of free cash or instead of the traditional method, I would like to be reviewed before we close out that project or the proposal for the budget.
So it
If that
does
makes
seem,
sense.
it seems like we should be, I mean, I think going in that direction, like coming up with some deadline for these bigger projects. I mean, I know there's gonna be the 30s and 40 and $50,000 requests, but I think we're talking, you know, in the mindset of capital requests, that we ask for a short deadline so that we can look at them all and look at it within the context of your priorities, what you would take to town meeting if we didn't put ARPA money in it, you know, or even regardless, whatever. That seems like I mean, my feeling around ARPA has been consistent, and I've been talking about this in different places, that, you know, this is once in a lifetime, huge chunks of money that we should be thinking, what are the things we've been waiting to fund? And that's why, I mean, to me, Lower Village just keeps coming back into my head, because how long we have, more than 10 years, I think, Lori, I'd say a lot longer, but so I'd like to be able to focus the first round of ARPA things. I know there's other things that would like to be funded sooner, and maybe when we have that conversation, we can say, okay, we'll put X number of dollars towards the smaller projects before town meeting or something, but yes.
Is the capital, I'm sorry,
You guys.
I wasn't.
All right.
It's always us, right?
Mr. Burns gets to go first. And then.
This time. So I want to further what you're thinking and maybe try to get some structure around what you're suggesting. And to me, it's that things are falling into slightly different funding categories, right? So we have the big requests that we think we need to pay for. We have some smaller requests that we think, we've been waiting for a while. How do we get this funded? It's 25 grand, but it would really make a huge impact on that. And then we can incentivize other things, right? Maybe we want to set up a fund for community-based projects because we would rather come work with the department to do something really cool in the community. And so maybe we could take what you're saying and either, what may be easier is sort of have the town administrator help us in, like, how do we make these categories, get it into this nice policy where we're then saying, hey, this falls into the community bucket and we have $200,000 in that community bucket. I'm just throwing out a number, not committing to anything. But that we put, a certain amount in that, we put a certain amount in these other small projects, and maybe we want to reserve as a board $1 million because we think that can make a big impact on a really big project that we want to see funded, and that's the one where we sort of consider this. Because I think at the end of the day, when we provide that, it helps Denise also when she's hearing from her department say, hey, this one actually would fall under that. That may be a really good idea. Like, let's develop this and bring it to the board. That way we can give her some really clear instructions on that. We've also really set the guidelines of where we'd like to see the funds. So, I'd like to basically say, like, Denise, can you help us get that together? The numbers we can set, but get that structure together for us on that funding. So then as a board, we've really sort of have collected ourselves around an approach that we'd like to use here, see what comes in. Obviously, we can always adapt after we get the first couple of rounds. Maybe we get a lot in one and none in the other, and we've missed a mark. But that's kind of how I'd like to see it. And then I think we can layer this on the timeline question that would facilitate these initial, batch coming in that we know folks are thinking about budgets right now, and we can layer that on. But if we can get some structure on how we want to spend the money in categories, it may really help us move forward and distribute while also staying focused on strategy, right, of what I think you're talking about.
What do you think? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I will say we had 2,162,000, and we've already allocated funding, the largest portion to PFAS. So based on my calculation, and I'd have to double check what we've already allocated, that would leave 1,477,292 up for grabs. So I would caution leaving $1 million because the rest of that will go really quickly. But I think, I would agree. I think even if we decide, $250,000 to go towards traditional capital related projects, because then I can say, yes, only 2 came in so far, but I think take out the library, we still have $4 million worth of, it has to be more than that, $4 to $6 million worth of capital projects. So if I can say, let's take out these few, capital agrees that they're worthy projects, then, we can get those going. Like for instance, the fire department is looking for defibrillators for all the buildings. Well, that's a very worthy purpose. And if we can get that going now, instead of waiting till July, let's just get that off the table and use some of those funds. I think sort of the community bucket goes back to our very first conversation that, if there are some things that can be done that really is for the greater good of the community as a whole, whether that's by a department or whether that's someone in the community that says, hey, I have this really great idea. I think that's perfect. So if you want to say, again, $200,000 for community related projects, and then, whatever the other categories are, still leaving $600,000-700,000 for either discretionary for you all or to allocate at a later time, I think makes sense. So at least it gives some direction as things come in. And then you could certainly, it could be like an infrastructure that sort of the lower village water or something like that would sort of cover that category. But I think that would at least help. So if you say 200,000 in capital, I can put together either what's been requested or what's been requested through capital to say, these are the ones that I would recommend we fund, and we fund them this way and get them going and sooner than town meeting and sooner than July 1st.
And would there be a deadline for these community project applications?
So we can, it really depends how the board feels. We have until December 31st, 2024 to allocate the funding.
Right.
If we want to have a deadline and put everything up front and just as it comes in, or if you want to hold some money to say, well, we really don't, let's save 200,000 for next year and see what comes in.
So you're really advocating just doing this, your initial round, which we have to do right now, on kind of a rolling ad hoc as they come in kind of basis. Modified with Zach's suggestion of some sort of a reserve for community projects. And we all understand community projects means also sponsored by a town department.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You know, every town has been different. Some towns, some towns,
Spent all their money.
the money came in, the town administrator gave a list and called it a day. There was no input. The town administrator said, here's how we want to spend it, and the board has approved it.
Yeah.
Other towns have said, you know, obviously the smaller towns do not have a lot. And even though $2 million is a lot of money, it will go very quickly.
Yeah.
So some other towns have said, well, we have a couple of projects and it's done. It's really up to us how we choose and when we choose to spend these funds.
Yeah, I'm still, I mean, I like the idea of some buckets with, you know, with some amount of money sort of earmarked for different buckets, but I do want to start with the capital, because it does feel like we know there's a lot coming up, doesn't mean we're gonna fund it all, but this seems to be, it's timing right to, like, since you're already doing that with town meeting, with capital planning committee, like, let's look at that list and ask people to give them a deadline, you know, whether it's planning board or whoever, to, you know, say, if you want to have a big capital project, you know, can you get us at least the general information or the general targeted amount by whatever, you know, February 1st too soon, but February 15th or something. I mean, it just feels like that's, so we make sure that we're hitting some of the big ones first, because what I don't want, I know the capital planning struggles with this every year, and there's always things that say, no, we really don't need to spend this money, but I would hate to feel like there's really some important stuff that we just can't afford to do it all in 1 year. And if we have the ARPA money, maybe it's the best use of it, so.
Right, but keep in mind, capital, while they take it into consideration, they don't have anything to do with the funding mechanism. So they don't weigh in on how it should be funded, what should be funded. They say, these are the projects we believe go forward. Now, I could certainly say to them, if they don't like the defibrillator project, I could say, well, it meets the criteria, we're gonna fund it out of completely separate funding. Now, technically, under the law, it's this board and this board only. Our bylaws say it meets the criteria of capital, but the ARPA regulations is this board is the only discretionary
No, I
decision.
understand that.
So, but that would be something you all would decide if capital is completely against something and I feel it's worthy and you feel it's worthy, really you have the ability to move it forward. I mean, I don't think we would get into that situation, but that is the reality.
Okay.
So I would say if there is a number for capital projects and someone in a department doesn't give it to me as a project request for ARPA, I can still say, well, these are the projects that, you know, in talking to the departments, the priority, and just sort of recommend them under the capital category because they've already submitted all the documentation through the budget process. It's just the ones that came in and I'll say it because he's on here. It was Mike and he couldn't wait to get his project submitted the next morning because he, you know, truly believes in the projects that he submitted. So he wants to make sure that they're looked at in every aspect and every way that we can.
Right. Yes, Jim.
Does anybody else have anything? I mean, I have one hesitancy, and I'm happy to be talked out of it or to realize nobody else has this concern. Decisions whether or not to fund a specific project are often relative, meaning they're good ideas or bad ideas compared to the other places you can put the same funding. That's why I keep harping on the deadline idea, is that I want to be able to look at a universe. I realize there's something that's going to last 4 years. I'm never going to be able to do that. But I was, as I walked into the room, thinking of a process like the CPC thing. All right, everybody, funding round for this year, got to get your applications in by a certain date. That way, at least I can look at the universe for that year. No?
Yeah, no, I think
I
that's
like that
fine.
idea
I think that's
actually a
fine.
lot. Because I also think that allows us to say no. You know, like if we get them in and we're like, we don't really think that this is going to, either it's not well thought out enough or it doesn't really rise to the standards of whatever our standards are, given the application. Yeah, no, I like, that's more what I was thinking. It would be like a CPC kind of process, so.
Me too.
Okay.
Do you want to draft something based on what we just said and we can approve it at the next meeting? It seems like there's three elements. The initial round, which I don't even think you put the policy, you're just going to do it. Somehow folding in deadlines, up to you. And then a reserve for community-based projects. I've recommended amount. I mean,
Well, so does the board? I mean, I'm happy to put something together, but I feel like I think you need to give me some direction. If, like, how much would you be comfortable with as a threshold for capital projects to look at? What would you like as a reserve? I mean, we can obviously change it, but you know, I don't want to just put numbers before you all if you have a different idea.
I'll throw something out just to get the game going. It's sort of like poker, you got to play.
Right.
I'll say 500,000 on capital because, you know, the alternative is paying interest.
Yeah.
You mentioned 200 for community reserve. I'm going to say 300.
Yeah. For community projects.
Community?
Yeah.
Because I think it
that's
can
way
come
too
out over.
I'm getting bug eyes. Okay, so
Well,
But I think community, that could be property.
Right, and Lower Village could be
Lower
considered
Village could
community
be, yeah.
projects because it affects the greater good of, you know, we could certainly do that.
I don't think that community is like a mural. Like, I don't think anybody's saying like, it's gonna be like a $300,000 to that. I think it's, and I like 300,000 because then that is over, that we could say that's over 4 years or that's over the amount of time. And so it is a bunch of smaller projects or it is that, but I like that idea so we can play with it a little bit more.
I think part of the application too is that people can actually tell us why they think it falls into the category. So like, I think about SMAHT and I think you can argue, tell me why this affordable housing is actually for the betterment of the community over here on Crescent Street. That's meaningful. And again, because I use Mr. Selby's, it's a relative approach of what this is supposed to look like compared to everything else. And I think we're going to see such a variety in these categories, especially in community, that we'll be able to fund certain aspects. So I like the 300 kids.
So that's got us at 8. So what
Yeah,
else
so
are
my
we
only
doing?
question to that though is I've already sent out the form. I don't really want to have to redo the form. I can certainly ask when projects are submitted, what category they believe they fall under, but I have already submitted the guidelines in the form out to folks.
yeah, that's fine. I would just send it.
I just find.
Yeah, so I can just revise sort of the timelines, but
So that leaves us about almost $700,000.
677,000.
Yeah, for other projects.
I'm just concerned that that definition of community is way too broad. And I mean, I when Zach first mentioned it, I was thinking much more of the smaller, you know, for creative small projects. Because the whole, I mean, all the money is supposed to be, I mean, what's the universal use of it? I mean, it's supposed to be, you know, municipal use, right? And basically, which to me its definition is for the community.
So like what, pickleball?
Well, no,
I mean,
that's
I'm
right.
serious.
I mean,
Like, yeah, but I mean, that's like a lot of people seem to really like pickleball and.
But we're talking about designated a pot of money that's called community as opposed to the rest of the money, which is also for the community. So I'm concerned about what it means, you know.
I think it's fair question. I think we could do one or two things. We could kick it around here, or we could ask the town administrator to draft something up for the next meeting, which we could change. I'm just going to say, to me, community means community initiated.
that's what I,
And keep in mind, it has to be sponsored by a department.
right.
Well, so I would say though,
So,
if you're saying community initiated, I think 300,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
I think if it's projects that departments may have that benefits and you know, by community, let's say Laura says, I think we should have an expanded playground. To me, that's community because it affects, whereas equipment, yes, it affects the community because they're not paying for it through their tax money, but you know, the residents aren't going to get a benefit of tasers for the police department. So I think, you know, if it's community, if it's community initiated projects, I would ask the number be a little bit lower and we see how that goes.
Okay.
But if it's, you know,
I see.
because I think there are still departments, because again, you know, the Lower Village Water Study, I mean, that's to me, it affects residents as much as it affects the departments. It's not just department equipment, infrastructure, things like that.
Yeah, because I would increase the first, I don't remember now what you called it, the major number from 500 to 700.
Capital was what it was.
It was called capital.
Just capital is what it.
Because to me, that's where I want to see the bulk of the money, this one-time huge chunk of money we're getting, you know, spent on things that we couldn't otherwise afford to do.
So you do 7 and 1?
750.
I was actually thinking more about the reserve category that I was thinking about what we're willing to lay out this year and sort of asking requests and then reserving our right to come back to that money. So if somebody does that. So I like the 500 just because I think it gives Denise a number. And if she says it's 550, we have the reserve and we can say that these projects work. So that's how I was sort of operating with that sort of assumption that the rest would be reserved for our future use and we can choose now or later to operate on it in whatever way we see. I think it's your capital goal.
I would still make the capital higher, like maybe, okay, say, what did you just say, 750 or 600 and do community at 100. I'd be more comfortable. I don't understand. I mean, I don't see the community initiated projects being that close to the capital number.
If they're community initiated, I would agree. I don't know that there's a lot of folks looking to initiate a community project. So if we're using it to be an initiated, then it could be a lower number and it could be increased by the reserve.
Right.
I'm fine.
And I also think that that's where we give the community more time. You know, they have all year, they have 2 years to, you know, to think about it. It's not like,
Well,
if a bigger project takes a while to think about.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And it could be smaller grants to
Right.
different
Yes,
organizations.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a one time. Not one time.
Right. So what are the numbers I'm playing with right now?
750. Yeah.
Take 600 for capital
For capital.
and 100 for community
So that's at
initiated.
7.
And then the rest is just it for the reserve for
Reserve.
now. Because that's basically half of what's left,
Yeah, I think that's good.
roughly, right? Because that's 700, and you said we had 1477.
And so if a department submits something that doesn't fall under capital or community initiated,
So that's the reserve that we can still look at, as not like
Okay.
we're not looking at them.
okay,
Is that what people's assumption was, right? That it's not like we can't spend it,
okay.
but we're saying a certain amount of designated for 2 pubs and then everything else.
That's what
Yeah, that
Okay,
makes sense.
perfect. And then,
My question is, do we want to actually reserve money for a later date that we want to let people know that we do have a cap that, you know, maybe roughly half of the balance or close to that so that
I
we
feel like
don't.
right now it's too soon to say that. I mean, I think let's see how the next month or so goes in terms of requests we see and, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
so what would you like the first deadline to be?
February
Other than
15th.
capital? Well, I'm gonna take capital off the
Yeah.
table. So what would you like the first deadline for project requests in general?
March 1st. March 1st sounds like a good date.
Yeah.
This is how it's done.
And in the guidelines, based on prior conversations, I had wrote that the board may convene a subcommittee. Oh, is it just gonna be this board?
I think it's this.
I think so. If it's financial, I think it needs to be this board.
If you're bringing to us everything you get, including the things you're recommending and not recommending.
Yeah.
I think we're hitting the transparency,
Mhm.
you know, and it's just you making the recommendations
Mhm.
that
So then that's my next question. So you would like a recommendation for me on all the projects submitted or all the requests?
I think so, just because you are the one who's got the 10,000-foot big picture of the budget. And so I think I would like your input on that for sure.
And I guess one more, do you want to establish a second deadline now so people know if they miss the March 1st, they have June 1st or July 1st to submit again? Or do you want to just wait and see how we play it out with?
Let's wait and see. Can we wait and see? Or do you think we should just say July 1st or?
It definitely, I think it should be after town meeting,
Yes.
because then whatever doesn't pass, then we possibly could be getting more funding requests after, so.
I think we
June
could,
1st.
we could also say that we will come up with another deadline for, a later
After our
later
first review.
round.
Okay.
I mean, so if you miss it, it doesn't mean you're cut out for good. It just means we don't.
Yeah,
know
it's a
yet.
4-year period that maybe needs to come up later on.
Mhm.
I mean, you're foolish though if you wait when you don't have to.
But people may, I mean, it is a busy time of year, so people may
Right.
not be able to get the numbers together for
Right,
March
right,
1st.
right.
So does that work for you? Just double checking.
That's fine. Right now, my priority is capital. So if I can
Yeah.
figure out how much I can give this board as request under the capital bucket, that's great, because that's what I'm struggling with now with the requests that have come up.
Right. And the dam money. We haven't taken anything out yet for that, right? I mean, that's a conversation we've had a couple times, but nothing definite yet. So I assume that's one of the things you're thinking. Maybe.
Yes, obviously not through this because $4.5 million.
Right.
But yes, there are grant opportunities that we're looking at and other funding mechanisms, but we have to have a contingency in place if we don't get that. We can't just not fix and
Yeah.
make repairs to the dam.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
So I would ask if someone could make a motion on allocating $600,000 towards the fiscal 23 capital program, $100,000 towards community initiated projects, the remaining funds to be held in reserve, and the deadline for applications for the first round of review is March 1st.
Sounds well enough to say so moved.
Second.
Any other discussion, questions, clarification? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Thank you all. That was good.
Yes, thank you.
I was making sausage.
Making the sausage,
Yeah.
right? Gets ugly, but. So next item is the updated discussion on the vaccine mandate policy.
Madam Chair, may I ask to do the meeting minutes?
Sure, yes, let's do the meeting minutes first. Did anybody have any changes to the minutes as presented?
I have a couple of comments on the correspondence section.
Okay.
Correspondence of the minutes that.
In
that
the
discussion?
minutes,
Yeah.
the section about
Yes.
correspondence. So the second line where it says in response to a bonding request. I think that would be more correct if it said something like in response to a request to discuss bonding.
Yes, that's right. Right. Got it.
And then further down in the same section, let's see, it's the middle of the third paragraph, which I don't have in front of me. We're in the middle of the paragraph, it says in a timely fashion, and it goes on. So we're talking about recognitions and so forth. That just seems awkward to me. So maybe in a timely fashion, so we can recognize and acknowledge various groups and topics, something like that.
It's a weirdly worded sentence.
It's,
anyway.
yeah, it's just awkward. So I don't think it does as well in this.
Can you maybe send Joyce the wording? I think we get,
Absolutely, yeah.
that'd be easier for both Denise and Joyce.
Just as long as the agreement is.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to make it less awkward and more clear.
Great.
Any other changes? I'll take a motion on the minutes.
I move we accept the January 11th minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Great. Okay. Mr. Burns will be leading us. I'm gonna just say that he is excused from this discussion because of his work in the pharmaceutical industry and has been guided by Attorney General's recommendations. So I think people ask me.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to share. I work for Moderna. So when we discuss vaccine mandates, I'm going to be in the room because I have stock options, which is technically ownership of the company. And so I'm fully disclosed that. I've filed the right forms and I've spoken with the Attorney General's office to ensure that I should recuse myself. And the answer was that I should recuse myself from these conversations.
Sorry that you missed the fun.
Yeah. We'll miss your insights.
That's right, yes, yes.
Good night. Good night.
So we decided at the last meeting, we just went with a mask mandate, and the word is that it has been well adhered to, that's the word I was looking for.
Yes.
But I did feel like we should just have, we did get more correspondence. I believe we all received both copies of the petitions that were sent around, as well as from letters from some other staff in favor of a vaccine mandate. So I wanted to bring it up again. The numbers haven't gotten better. We were hoping they would. I'm personally concerned about the number of staff who are really feeling unsafe in the building. Not knowing both from other coworkers, whether they're safe around them and that they're not comfortable coming back. So that's my personal take on it, but I wanted to open it up for discussion. Maybe, I don't know, Denise, if you want to start with anything, or if you just want to ask the board any further thoughts. We've had time to think about this over the last few weeks.
I'm happy to comment, or if you want the board members to comment first, however you'd like to handle it.
Well, I'd like to hear like an update on my question. Yeah, how it's going, and any update on your answer last time about operational effect.
Yes.
Yeah,
So I will say the mandatory mask policy has been adhered to. I actually, one department who we were constantly having issues with, as of, first thing the next morning, they were wearing masks. Several members of the department has approached me and said they understand, they're taking it very seriously. Folks that there were some complaints made at the last meeting about, they are wearing masks. So I do think that is, I think the message was received. So I don't feel that we have any issues with that. I will say Dolores and I met with one of the unions, the one that has the most unvaccinated employees. Their position is, now quite frankly, as we mentioned, it is an impact bargaining requirement, but we can still implement it, much as you've seen with what's happening in Boston, but we still have to discuss the impact. Their union's position is very similar to the Boston firefighters. They would be fine with a vaccine mandate if we removed the exemptions and allowed a vaccine or test weekly policy. Their members were all fine with testing in lieu of being vaccinated and not having to come up with some reason that they don't want to be vaccinated. So that is a potential. In regards to the question I was asked last week about operations, I cannot say that we would not suffer in operations if the mandate went in. We would suffer. It was told to me by the union we met with that 8 of the employees, and this was from the union rep, not even the employees, 8 of the members would resign. And that would wipe out a department. And so we would not be able to function properly if we were to pass a vaccination requirement with no other alternatives other than exemptions.
So that union rep, though, was that the same union who said they would, if we gave them the alternative, the testing versus mandate, that they would be okay with that?
Yes, that was their request to us, that they would support, not necessarily support, they would not oppose a vaccine mandate that allowed a testing option in lieu of vaccination.
That would be the weekly testing that's in our draft.
Yes.
And that's on their dime.
So they completely, like, time and material, so to speak. So it sounds like the primary objection is to having to give an explanation for the reluctance to be vaccinated.
Yes, because what we've learned over the last 2 weeks is the folks that we have spoken with do not have, and I'll use the word justified, even though that's not the right word, but they don't have a justified reason. It's not a medical exemption. It's not a religious exemption.
Yeah.
They are just opposed to the vaccine.
It's
So
a personal.
it's a personal, right, so- but so they would not meet one of those criteria. And so they, yes, so they would, instead of making stuff up, instead of, and if they fell into one of those categories, as it was mentioned by an employee at the last meeting, they don't want to give those private details out. So this would be a way to put something in place if the board chose with an option. Dolores and I are meeting with 2 other unions. They're represented by the same union rep on Tuesday. Although I will say out of both of those unions, only one person is not vaccinated and there is legitimate medical reasons. So I think their opposition is just, they don't feel it should be a mandatory decision, but they are all vaccinated other than one for the unions that we're meeting with next week.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I personally feel that if our staff is willing to get tested and provide evidence that they are doing what they can to be healthy when they come to work for the safety of others, that they don't need to give a reason for their reluctance to be vaccinated. I believe that for me, having a policy in place is to make people feel safe. And when I walk around on the street, I don't know who's got what going on, but if they have a mask on, at least I know that they have a mask on. And I think, the additional evidence of regular testing of a certain quality, not like an at-home test.
Right, it could not be an at-home test because then there would have to be a proxy administering it, so we knew it was actually taken when it was taken.
Right.
So no, it would have to be an actual test that has a piece of paper that shows a result from some facility or some site.
I also feel that it's really important not to cripple ourselves with undue policy administration. So those are my thoughts.
So I think Courtney just covered this. The testing would be at the employee's expense on their time. Obviously, can they use paid leave?
Oh, they could request time off, yes.
That's their.
Or lunchtime if they have it.
And they would offer documentation of the result. I don't know why they want to do that, but I'm fine with that. I made my position on the mandatory vaccine policy clear the last time in the abstract. I'm certainly in favor of it, and I want to do everything we can. I can't ignore the operational impact, which this time you're being a little bit more forceful about that, and I take it that that's a result of all the conversations you've had.
Correct.
I'm also struck by the fact that, well, I want to ask you a question. The mask policy has improved. Is that because you and Dolores are spending a ton of time reminding people? No.
No, so we put it out and we put out a signature page having employees indicate that they have received it and read it and understand the policy. The very first day the morning after our meeting, there was definitely this one walked in the building without a mask on this, and we were like, listen.
Yeah.
We're gonna all take this seriously. And I will say, I have not seen somebody without their mask on. And as I said, the departments that we had some serious concerns, department heads came to me and said it was better. Other staff has come to me, and members of their department have said, we heard it and we are taking this very seriously.
So that strikes me as people meeting us halfway. So I'm happy to reciprocate. I'd like to keep that in place, but kind of move toward the mandatory vaccination and testing type of. I like getting rid of the excuses. That just muddies everything up.
Yes.
I think my only concern about that is, as much as the union has said that they're okay with that and they're willing to do it, when the feet meet the fire, if we do that, is there a guarantee that we are not going to cripple that particular department? I mean, that's what I've been wrestling with the last couple of weeks is my personal feelings and then my feelings about the workings of the town in my role right here. And so I really am concerned about that. And so I just don't know what the ramifications are. And I mean, or what the guarantees are, right? That if we were to do this and we meet them at whatever that request is, that we still wouldn't have 8 people walking off the job.
Right, and if I can just say though, and that's only 8 people. So I don't, quite frankly, I don't know how others that are not vaccinated feel. And
right,
and I'll be honest, I am the only one who knows who was vaccinated. Even Dolores does not know. I am the only one who knows who was vaccinated and not vaccinated.
But it's a total of 13 or something.
There's 13.
So if that's 8 you know about, there's 5 other people that we don't yet.
Well, and they're not right, and they're not representative by that union.
Correct, but
right.
Everyone all employees that are unvaccinated, I mean, obviously every employee is very valuable. I want to start, but those that are not vaccinated hold substantial positions that even if one of them were to leave, it would impact our operations. I've spoken to department heads, I've spoken to others. Given the state of employment right now, being able to backfill and hire for any one of these positions, other than, and we do have several call firefighters that are on the list. But we have, 50 other call firefighters. But the remaining employees, they all handle very specific tasks that would be very difficult to replace any of them. Now, that being said, there is an option. It's not a requirement to be vaccinated. There is an option. My concern, to Megan's point, is it's still very difficult to get a test. It's very difficult to get a test at a facility where you get results, and you can get results every week. And that's what I would be concerned with, is if someone doesn't meet that requirement. So if we say every Friday you need to be tested to come back on Monday, and they don't have those results, well, then they can't come back on Monday.
Right.
And, maybe they don't get tested till Monday, and then they can't come back till Wednesday because they don't get the results. And then technically they're supposed to be tested again on Friday. Because it's so difficult right now to get testing. And again, that's why Boston did away with it, because people can't get tested. So it was causing too much difficulty.
Right.
I get what you're saying. And I think one conversation with one union rep doesn't necessarily mean everybody goes along with it. And all those reasons were why, when I listed that stuff, I said, I don't know why they would agree with this, because it's difficult. So we're heading toward keeping the mask mandate, which seems to be working, in place. I'm concerned about only one thing. All of the things you just said about the difficulty of the employment environment could also apply to any decisions that you and Dolores have to make about discipline. And I thought this board was quite clear, and I want to make sure that we still are clear, that whatever policy we come up with, it sounds like it's going to be the mask mandate, be enforced very strictly. I'm not saying, and I don't think anyone say termination upon first violation. You guys can handle that, but inaction would not be acceptable.
Oh, I completely agree. Yes, okay. Yes. And that's not the intention. Because to me, at that point, it's, we're doing everything we can to keep folks employed and working here. But if they just can't follow the rules, they can't follow the rules. Yeah, that would not stop us from taking disciplinary action if needed. Because my primary goal is to keep employees safe. And, you know, I know, because I've heard from a number of employees that have reached out to you directly about their concerns and their urging of you to pass the vaccine mandate. And I completely hear what they have to say. I understand it, but they're not filling the positions if they're empty. Right. And quite frankly, they're not doing the work if someone leaves. And, you know, we have a small staff anyways. And to try and even cover a number of these positions at once, it would, quite frankly, it would cripple us. I don't know how we would do it. And I don't want that to be, you know, a complete deterrent. We'll make it work, whatever we need to do. But that's my concern is and I'll be honest, and council has said, look at the communities that have put mandates in place. Very few people actually quit. At the end of the day, a paycheck, health insurance, vacation time is worth much more than their decision to not be vaccinated. Very few people have quit if you look at the communities that have implemented them. But I don't know if I can take that chance.
Right, I would like to take that risk, right?
Right. You're also, you know, this is a season where you're really busy, you've got, you know, a very critical task or a number of tasks already. And so to have an additional stressor is, if we can avoid it, why don't we?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say if we could, again, have it on your meetings, have the conversation at every meeting if you'd like, but I'd ask that we stay with the mask mandate. It's in place and continue to see how that goes. And quite frankly, if in the middle of a cycle, something happens, we could have an emergency meeting to discuss it further, or if something more significant were to change. But I just, I'm very nervous about what it would do for our already small workforce.
Yeah. I just want to say, I'm concerned that we're allowing the minority to rule, and some of the staff who are really nervous about being around unvaccinated people are getting the short stick. I mean, makes me crazy, and I'm really disappointed with some of these staff that they've definitely, it's changed. I will say it's changed my opinion of them, because I don't think they're not thinking about their coworkers. They're just thinking about themselves, and that's really disappointing.
And I will say, I mean, I understand, but while you say they're getting the short stick, but we're making as many accommodations as we can to make them feel better.
Right.
So whether it's alternate work settings, work from home, I mean, we're doing what we can so that they don't have to come in here and feel uncomfortable sitting in their desk every day.
Right.
Again, that makes things difficult too, because
absolutely,
you know, staff in offices now that we're reopened is becoming a little difficult. But again, I am willing to do what I can to make sure employees that are not comfortable or not safe feel that way. And that's been difficult sometimes too, because it obviously does affect operations trying to maneuver but yes, we're doing as much as we can to make them feel like they're not getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah. And may I assume that employees who are concerned, they see somebody without a mask, they can go to, I want to assume it's Dolores, and on a confidential basis say, hey, I really think you need to say something to somebody. You know, and Dolores may or may not. It may be like, you know, first thing tomorrow morning, like you said, but they can do that on a confidential basis.
Yes.
Yeah, I did. And this is more future looking. But do you have a thought as to what the caseload would have to get down to in order to lift masks? Like, I know right now we're in the thick of it, right? But I think also part of, this may be me parenting young children, but part of getting people to kind of acquiesce to the situation that they're in the moment is to be able to see a future where you don't have to do this. So, we all understand. We've been living in the pandemic for 3 years.
I know. I wish.
But I'm just saying, like, I know no one's got a crystal ball, but you know, if we keep doing that, again, if everybody would get vaccinated, but if everybody wears masks, what do we what are we looking for? And
So-
maybe people wear masks in town building, and that's an employee's
Right,
decision.
and it may be, I mean, obviously, you know, we participate in a ton of meetings and we hear everything.
Yeah.
There are the calls for everyone to stop wearing masks and have it spread around so that, you know, it's the way of the future and this is it, and we just need to adjust to it like the flu. There are the folks that say masks will become a permanent form of everyone's life, whether it's on an airplane, on public transportation. They envision masks being worn forever. You know, to me, it will always be an employee's choice. I think we're still in that, which drives me crazy, that employees are still showing up to work sick. And the fact that we have to say to people, go home,
Right.
you are sick, even,
Right.
and yes, you tested negative, that's fine, you are still sick, you
You
need
said
to go
right.
home. So I don't know
Right.
what,
Yeah.
you know, I wish we did have some projections.
Yeah.
But you know, every time we think that things are winding down, there's another variant and
Right.
things kick back up.
Right,
So
right.
I don't know. I do think things will improve a little bit again once it starts to get warmer out and people are gonna have windows open and people are, you know, can go out and walk. I think we're right back to, you know, almost 2 years ago that everyone's sort of locked, no one's doing anything anymore. No one's going out, no one's
Right.
going to restaurants
Right.
because it's so prevalent. And, you know, that weighs on people too.
Right.
And, you know, people aren't going to family events anymore
Right.
because it's just,
Right.
so I think overall it weighs on people.
Right.
And so to be able to have warmer weather and, you know, be able to go out and do more things, people can adjust a little bit better to the situation, but it's winter, it's cold, it's dreary, it's,
Yeah.
everyone has it, everyone's, you know, it's.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, so, I mean, I think it was clear we're staying with the mask mandate and we won't.
We don't need to take a vote on that?
No, we already
No,
voted.
we already voted it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on until we say it's not, right? So,
Right.
thank you for persevering through this and trying to make everybody happy in a possible situation.
And I just want to say, I appreciate the thoughtfulness that everyone is bringing to the table on this, in this room. This is not a decision that any of us, I think, make lightly.
Yeah.
I think that we are all really, really struggling with this. And I want people to understand that this is not a, you know, a quick decision that any of us has made. And I appreciate the conversations that we've been able to have about this, because it's weighing a lot on me.
And similarly, I'd like to say, I appreciate the people who wrote in.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
On both sides of the
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
Yes.
You know, we're trying to come up with the right thing to do, but it's a matter of balancing interests.
Yes, and hopefully next time we'll hear better numbers and
Yes.
maybe. Okay. I think there is, unless anybody had anything around correspondence to, thank you for writing the letter for a minute, ma'am. Lovely. You're welcome.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
That will be
That's great.
exciting.
Nice,
Yes,
nice letter.
thank you.
So we do, the next meeting, just so you know, we expect to, as Jesse said earlier, the LIP application, we expect to have at that meeting, and then the next one after that is hopefully CBC, right? I think they won't come until the 22nd.
So,
Is that the plan?
I guess so, if, yeah, because they wouldn't be voting, until the 7th. And quite frankly, I think it depends on how they vote, if they even will come before this board. I mean, they may just come and talk about the projects, I don't know, but if they are looking for support or recommendations, which I don't think they are. I've had a conversation with them at the, not last night's meeting, their last meeting. There were some questions about bonding and who ultimately makes that decision. And when I told them it would be them, because they would have to recommend their articles that way, I think they understood that they don't need your permission if they want to get your support. That's another thing. The second meeting in February is my financial state of the town, so that is on that meeting. And there's something else I have tentative already on that meeting. I don't remember what it is at this point, but there's something else that we had on that meeting. But
I guess I didn't write it down. Okay, well, we got time to figure that out.
yes.
Yeah. So. Okay,
Hope everyone's got their shovels at the ready.
anybody have a motion?
Sure, I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Stay healthy, everybody.
Yeah.